Welcome back to Tide Pod on the YouTube home of TideIllustrated.com. Jack Knowlton, Tony Sakalis, your resident Tide Illustrators. Is that what we should call ourselves? I don't know. Maybe we might need a different name. Tide Illustrators.
I don't hate it. I don't hate it.
We'll workshop that.
But anyway, we're drawing stuff, which is if that's the case, we wouldn't have a successful business.
We're drawing the narrative for Alabama football, which Tony is back. And we can officially say that now. Alabama football is back. A new era, of course, with DeBoer. Fall camp is underway for the Crimson Tide. If you live near their practice field, you've probably seen more of it than we have because there's people going out on their balconies and watching that. That was a thing that emerged from.
If you live near the practice field and have access like that, you're probably making millions of dollars and probably somehow donating to Tide Pride and getting that information anyway. So, but yes,
that's a good point.
Those condos are quite expensive. It's not like the average Joe. Nobody calling into Feinbaum has that access.
So as long as they're keeping Connor Stallions out of there, I guess then that's all.
Oh, you never know. I mean, yeah, maybe. There you go.
Spying.
Once that gets out, you're gonna see a lot of Michigan flags displayed on the outside out of the. I'm not talking
the windows.
Right. Yeah, the windows.
Yeah, but
that was half baked.
Yeah, but the anyway, those are the shenanigans emerging from fall camp. But it is back, Tony. We are gonna recap. We wanted to hop on and talk about the first 2 days of fall camp that we've gotten to see, at least for the Crimson Tide. The portions media is able to view. You and I were both there, and I'll just start with your general first impressions. Obviously, you were at spring practice. We've seen already some of the DeBoer era and the way the culture's kind of changing and the way he coaches. Did anything in particular in these first 2 days in the fall kind of catch your eye? Any mannerisms from any of the coaches? What was your overall just impressions of the first 2 days?
No, there was a lot of carryover in terms of dynamic and feel at practice from the spring. Obviously, when we went in the spring, it was totally different than a Nick Saban practice. And now, it's kind of, we're used to it. The one thing I guess that I am not used to it's going to take a few more of these early morning practices. These used to be an afternoon event for Nick Saban. We were out there like 3:40 or 4. I guess you weren't part of the beat at that time, but yeah, we were out there a lot later. It is a little bit less, it's a little cooler in the mornings than it would be if, they were doing it at 4 o'clock. Still getting used to waking up early, as us journalists don't usually have to wake up that early. I feel like a normal functioning member of society having to wake up and, go to work in the morning. Yeah. But it's been good. I think that, the general vibe of practice has been really positive. I think one of the things you see with this new staff is they're a little bit, I don't want to say less fiery, but it's more constructive criticism. I think you see a lot of hands-on, a lot of patience. You'll see just a lot of feedback back, instant feedback with the coach to every individual player. And I feel like that is more prevalent, at least for what we're seeing. Not to say that it didn't happen before, but you just see a lot of that. I don't know how many times I've seen Freddie Roach kind of take Keon Keeley off to the side and just really go through, individual drills as Keeley's switching from outside linebacker to a defensive line position. He's really giving them that hands-on treatment. Christian Robinson, who coaches the outside linebackers, I really like just the vibe he brings to practice and the constructive criticism. It seems like he has a great command of his unit. And we get to see the outside linebackers a little bit closer just based on where they're positioned on the field. But I've been impressed with him in terms of just like how he commands his unit and how his players respond to him when he's talking. And there's a lot of that, though. I think that, that goes pretty much across the board. There was a little bit of swearing,
a lot of it.
Yeah. Kane Wommack tore into someone. I don't think everyone subscribes to DeBoer's gentler coaching methods. That might be a DeBoer thing, and I don't think you're going to see Kalen. Now, I do bet you. I bet you there are fiery moments with Kalen behind the scenes. I don't think he's just blowing daffodils out there. But I think that Kane Wommack, you definitely saw that fire from him, and I bet you he can tear into some people. He's what is he, a Hattiesburg native, good Southern boy. He probably had a hard coach like that growing up, I could see him being just that fiery kind of guy. And man, it's got to be hard to work up that kind of anger or that kind of fire when you're wearing a sweatshirt in the middle of high 80-degree weather. But that's another takeaway that I have too, is Kane Wommack's out there in, joggers and a sweatshirt. He said he lost 7 pounds after the first day, and I believe it, because you've got to be working up a nice sweat there.
Yeah, I think that's where I wanted to go next. That was the question. I think someone, and you wrote about this, asked him if it was part of his feng shui. He promptly said, "I don't really know what that means, but yeah, I like to wear sweatshirts and a sweatsuit at practice." It just feels, as someone from the north originally who is not quite used to this heat, it just feels, I don't know how he doesn't pass out there, Tony.
I'm the king of getting like references wrong, but feng shui has nothing to do with like
I think it's just like part of your vibe. Yeah, I think it's just like I think it's just like
I thought that was,
I'll look it up.
I didn't even know that's the way. I thought feng shui was like organizing your table and your chair inside.
You're correct. It is an ancient Chinese practice that involves arranging objects, buildings, and space to create balance and harmony. So I think it's been spun in different ways, through the years. I don't know, but Kane Wommack did not.
Apparently, regardless, that's not where Kane Wommack's going with it. It's just something that he's used to. Is really what he said. It's just something that he's gone. I think it was originally a little bit of a sun protection measure. He talked about seeing older coaches get little spots and like sunspots, from being out there so long. So he wanted to, do something to guard against it. And he just got used to kind of working up a sweat. Now I feel like there's lighter sweatshirts, or maybe like a wind jacket or something like that. Just something really like
dry fit. Yeah. I don't know.
Or just go with the dry fit long sleeve if you're worried about the sun,
Yeah.
Yeah. Our colleague Nick Kelly from Mail.com wore a bucket hat, so like that might help,
But yeah, if you're really worried about shielding from the sun, that's a very good point.
That seems extreme, but I guess that's what he's doing. It's putting Jeff Allen to work, the head trainer, in order to keep him hydrated as well.
Yeah, they had a great tweet with the whole like team of people, and that's really something that always impresses me when you step out of football camp, is just all of the people running around, the support staff, like going, whether it's you see the classic like spraying the water bottle into the helmet or get me this, get me that, like those people are getting coached up as much as these players having to run around and help kind of this practice flow. So shout out to them. But yeah, last thing with the sweatshirt. He, DeBoer remarked on it. Malachi Moore was asked about it. He said he's tough. He's just like us. He's got a sweatshirt on out there. We're wearing tights, so it kind of coordinates. He's hot and we're hot. So I guess he's the players like that. He's
building
doing
up
the same
some cred, I guess.
Yeah. Well, let's dive into some of the storylines other than the apparel and stuff from fall camp, Tony. And we'll go kind of chronologically. And again, go over to TideIllustrated.com. We had all of our coverage there. Subscribe. We're dropping practice nuggets after every fall camp. So plenty of stuff to sink your teeth into. But I'm going to start on the offensive side of the ball, and with a person that I think, kind of feels natural given the hype he's gotten since he committed and signed with the Crimson Tide. It's Ryan Williams and the wide receivers, Tony. How did you think he fared? I know we were both kind of observing him, but what did you see from Ryan Williams just in general and the rest of the wide receivers? And I know Kalen DeBoer had some thoughts on Ryan's performances so far as well.
Yeah, he made a nice little one-handed catch there first time out there, and there's pictures of it you can see. He looks pretty good. He moves pretty well. It's kind of hard to judge these guys, if they're just doing footwork drills or they're not being guarded by a cornerback and they're just running routes. Sometimes it's just a go route from the quarterbacks. But he has all the makings of, what he's kind of come as advertised in terms of his catching ability. He pulled off a few, like I said, good catches. He looks to have quick feet. He moves well. He looks the part of it's not like he's out there stumbling or doing anything wrong, or it looks like there's some early growing pains. And, from the early conversations that, we've heard about him, He seems to be generating some really good reviews. I don't know if he's going to come in and just be this instant starter, and I think that's more of a testament to Alabama's receiving core and how deep it is. But in terms of having an instant impact this fall, I definitely think he'll be part of the mix, and he's somebody that's going to be a big part of this offense. Especially, I think he'll grow more and more as the fall progresses, and we get into some of these big games. I think he's going to be somebody that opposing defenses have to circle and have to really guard against, and he can do a lot of things.
Yeah, certainly. I think the narrative that's become built up, whether it's comments from DeBoer, Jamarcus Shepard, whoever else, is that he's made of the right stuff. He's mature enough. He takes in the information. He's like a sponge, all those types of things. And then you kind of saw it as he went through drills and just doing. And DeBoer kind of remarked on it. I'll read a partial quote. He said, "You just want him lining up." You just want him lining up right, doing the fundamental things, making the easy plays, and then because of his ability, the big ones will come. And I think you even saw that. He's able to make these kind of flashy one-handed catches in a drill, but he's also, I watched him going through the agility drills, and his footwork looked good there. He's watching what Kendrick Law does and mimicking it well on running routes, albeit against air. But it does look like he's made of the right stuff. He's taking in these reps really well.
I think too, the other thing we have to mention is this is always going to get we're going to be so tired of saying this by week 2 of the season, but he should be a senior in high school. He's only 17 years old. He's just a little baby. We're going to be saying that all fall, but I think when you talk about his maturity, you do have to highlight that a little bit. Not only is he just mature for a normal freshman, it's extra impressive considering his age. And I think he's coming in and those little things you talked about, like fundamentals and getting his footwork right on drills, that's going to be what's going to get him on the field. And it seems like he knows that. I think a lot of times you come in early as a freshman, you've dominated all your high school career. I mean, Ryan Williams is back-to-back Mr. Football in Alabama, who would have been 3-time Mr. Football at Alabama if he would have stayed in school. You come in with that kind of success and you kind of just think, okay, I'll let my talent, take over, and I'll just make these flashy catches and I'll impress people. And that's not what gets you on the field. Alabama has had star receivers, big time 5-star guys come into this program and not been able to click right away because they haven't gotten the fundamentals down. They can't be reliable on a consistent basis every single rep. I think what we're hearing about Ryan Williams is that he's focused on the right things. And I don't think that's going to be a problem for him. And I think if he can do that and polish up his game to where he needs to, like Kalen DeBoer said, those plays are going to happen. That's a natural, God-given thing that that will take over. If he's at the right spots on the field, doing the right things, when he gets in his moment, his God-given ability is going to kick in, and he's going to make these nice one-handed catches or burst away from defenders. Those are the things that he doesn't necessarily even need to work on. But he's developed those skills. It's just a matter of putting himself in a position to be able to use those skills. And it sounds like he's doing that. Now it's day 2. He's got to continue it. The grind of preseason camp, can't be overstated. It's really good to have a good first 2 days of preseason camp, but it's that continuing it is such a challenge. So that will be, something we'll watch. But early indications are that Ryan Williams has his head screwed on right, and he's going to make it's not going to be a tough transition for him.
Yeah, it'll certainly be interesting to see, what we can see from him here in the next couple of days of fall camp. Just with the receiver group in general, Tony, you mentioned, it's been those 3 guys: Kendrick Law, Kobe Prentice, Jeremy Bernard, as kind of the 3 starters. Any thoughts on what you got to see from them in the first 2 days, and maybe anyone else on the depth chart you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, I think those 3 guys are going to be your starters. I think on one of the drills, just highlighting somebody that doesn't get talked about enough. One of the drills, Ryan Williams was going 3rd, and I knew people were going to be freaked out, but Jaron Hamilton was the number 2 guy. Jaron Hamilton's a good little receiver that just never gets talked about. You know what I'm saying? And I mean, I'm guilty of it too, because I write about this team and I don't ever mention him, but he's a guy that has some talent. And if he's working, higher up in the depth chart, and I know we shouldn't really take, wide receiver order as gospel, But if he's somebody that's doing, getting those early reps, and you look at the talent that he has, let's not count him out as a potential, difference maker. There's a few of those guys that don't necessarily get talked about, like Jaron Hamilton, Emmanuel Henderson. These guys could come out of nowhere and be somewhat of a contributor as well. So it'd be interesting to watch them. I do think that, if I had to guess of the true difference makers in this offense, I would probably guess, Jeremy Bernard, Kendrick Law, Kobe Prentice, and then Ryan Williams. That's who I think are going to be your core four. But like I said, let's not count out anybody. It's too early for that. And there are some other receivers to definitely watch. Cole Adams, that slot receiver, I think Kobe Prentice has that role pretty much pinned down, but Cole Adams is a guy with really sure hands. He made some plays in the 8A game. He's the kind of guy that can just sneak up on you, especially kind of that possession guy over the middle. Your typical, just what you look for as a slot receiver, kind of a guy that can get open, kind of be a little bit shake and bake on defenders and consistently move the ball. I think that's going to be important in DeBoer's offense. So keep an eye on him as well. But there's plenty of those guys.
Yeah, definitely. It would be an interesting room to continue to watch, especially, of course, like we said, with Williams. Let's shift into the trenches for a second, Tony, because there was a good amount of talk, particularly from Kalen DeBoer, about this offensive line room. Obviously, some changes this summer and some key returners, one of whom being Kadyn Proctor. What did DeBoer have to say kind of about him? Had some good words for a guy who, yes, has been in this program before, but obviously wasn't with DeBoer for spring practice during that whole Alabama to Iowa, back to Alabama saga. And now he is back and seems like he's making good so far for DeBoer in fall camp.
Yeah, just in passing, I mean, I think Kalen DeBoer has talked about how easy Kadyn Proctor is to coach. You look at this guy and, maybe on paper you look, okay, 5-star kid, started right away, instantly transferred, and then transferred back. You start thinking like, oh, is there a problem here? Is this guy a head case? Is this guy going to be somebody that's going to be hard for a first-year head coach to manage? And that's clearly not the case. I think his move to Iowa was eye-opening. I think he kind of saw what he was missing at Alabama. And that's not to dunk on Iowa. I think Iowa's got a good program. But I think, there's certain things that Alabama has that very few other programs have. And, we talked about the training staff, earlier in the podcast. I think there's just a million things like that where it's like Alabama takes things to another level. And I think Kadyn Proctor kind of realized that. And so now you're getting a focused Kadyn Proctor who kind of like realizes how good he has it. And I think you're getting him to kind of click into that next gear. Also, Kadyn Proctor, there's not an official weight, and it's really hard because on Alabama's official roster, that says it's 6'7", 360, but they said that last year, and he was weighing way over 6'7", 360. So I don't believe maybe even that he's down to 360 yet, just because I think he was so over. But, we've seen him. We've seen pictures of him. He's been kind of on the far field. I don't know if you were there. We walked into the Mal Moore complex, and he had a shirt off. And, I wouldn't call him slim, but there's not a lot of times you see offensive linemen, they don't have their shirt on. You could tell they need to lose a few pounds. I thought Kadyn looked pretty good. I thought, maybe there's a little bit more like trimming down he can do, but for a guy that struggled with weight problems, and that was one of the things that kind of hampered him in his first season, I think he's making a huge progress. I don't know the weight that he's currently at or anything like that, or how he really compares to last year, because I don't know what his actual weight was last year. But he's looking good. He's looking like what you would think, a 5-star offensive tackle is going to look like. I think it's still a little bit of a work in progress. He could stand to slim up a few. You look at the way maybe J.C. Latham looked. He can kind of slim down a little bit, but like I think. It's there for Kadyn Proctor. He's working with the second team right now, but I think that the worst kept secret is that he's going to eventually land that left tackle role. I think it's just a matter of getting him back in the swing of things. And I think whether it's in one practice or 2 practices or 3, 4, we're going to see him move into that first team left tackle spot.
Yes. Yeah, I think you make a couple really good points. Yeah, it was kind of nice to just see him just by chance, nonetheless, and walk in and see him. And yeah, that'll be an interesting thing to see. When does he kind of make that jump? And I think the only thing I'll add is a quote from DeBoer where he said, DeBoer literally said, "It feels like he's in really good shape and lean. He's just so dense and has so much mass. He's gonna be big no matter what." But
it's always fun when we talk about these. Yeah, it's always fun when we talk about these big guys. It's just got so much mass. I mean, like
so much mass.
I would almost hate to be talked about like he's got so much. It feels like a a lamb
it's harsh
or something. But I get what you're saying. I think he's just
and I think DeBoer also, I'll just throw in too, made some good comments about he hasn't had the chance to see him in the spring, and it's going to take some time to figure out where he's at in the fall. But I think DeBoer's liking what he is seeing so far from Kadyn Proctor and liking the dedication. He said he's been very coachable. And so again, that kind of appeases going all the way back to what you said at the beginning, some of those thoughts that maybe he's a head case with the transfer situation and all that. And so I think it'll be could be setting up well here for Kadyn Proctor, and it'll be obviously a vital part to what should be a pretty good offensive line for Alabama. I'm going to flip to the D line, and something we ended up learning on day 2, Tony, with the bandit position, which is one that has been and should maybe be a competition. LT Overton, we got the news. Kane Wommack, we didn't see him the first 2 days. Asked Kane Wommack why. Good news is Kane Wommack just said he was feeling a little bit ill. Should probably be back within a couple of days. So obviously it's good that there's no long-term injury for the Texas A&M transfer. I'm curious though, with Jamarian Latham in the mix for that as well. How much of a leg up does that give a guy who's been in the program versus someone, maybe transferring in at that bandit competition?
Yeah, I don't think missing a couple of days is going to be a big deal. And I even heard from someone that maybe LT was back one of those days at the end of practice. Maybe he's just like, it's, one of those things where they're managing, maybe he's getting over something and they're just kind of managing his time out in the sun or something, hey, it could be as small as that, It's
no secret you can get dehydrated out there. We were literally out there. And
yeah, so if you're already like not doing well, and you're already trying to like manage your fluids and stuff, being out there for a full practice might not be the smartest thing. So that might just be a, kind of a load management early on in camp kind of thing. I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. Also, like, yes, that is a position battle that we'll be watching. It's also one that they're going to switch a lot. The winner of that battle is going to sub in and out with the number 2 guy. And I think those will be the 2 people that filter in and out of that bandit role. I think that's one of those positions you want to keep fresh on the field. So you'll see series where Overton comes in, you'll see series when Latham comes in, they both are pretty much built the same, and they're built for that position, at like 265 and 275, they're kind of like they're too small to be like a necessarily defensive tackle, but too big to be an outside linebacker. They're just that perfect middle right there at that bandit role, which is just like your strong side or heavy defensive edge rusher, So I think they're going to fit in just fine with that, with that spot. And I think LT Overton, 5-star talent, he did start a few games while he was at Texas A&M. So I think he's a guy that, has some SEC experience under his belt. I expect him to transition just fine whenever, he's a guy that, did pretty well in the spring too. So I expect Latham to win that job, but I expect to see plenty of LT Overton.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point. And I'm playing the role, the fan advocate role of does that put him a step or 2 behind? But I think you're right, and I think it goes into something Kane Wommack said where he's really liking what he's seen from both the bandit and wolf positions. Obviously, those 2, like you said, kind of tweener edge rusher types. Different, each player's at different sizes, but he's really liking what he's seeing out of both Latham and LT Overton. And Overton's an interesting case with, his playing time kind of got, cut from underneath him, and he's a former 5-star recruit. He's someone I'm really curious to see how he kind of goes next year.
A&M signed like 17 5-star defensive tackles, right? That's what happens when you sign that many players at one position.
It's
impossible for all of them to play. So yeah, I mean, I think that he, like, you look at the talent he was going up against at Texas A&M. There were some pretty high profile names, pretty, some really, I mean, that A&M defensive line class was just insane. So
Yeah.
the fact that he didn't, get full reps over there is, there was plenty of competition to work with. I do think that the Bandit and the Wolf spots, those are positions where I think Alabama has some depth. Maybe not like a certified star, but I think they've got capable options there. And one of the other things that Kane Wommack was talking about is just how much pressure, how aggressive he wants to be in this defense, and that goes down to the defensive tackles. You got guys like Tim Smith and Jaheim Otis and Daron Payne and or Damon Payne. Sorry, Daron Payne's not back. And Tim Keenan. Those guys might get more opportunities to rush the passer or to provide, inside pass rushing presence with this setup. And it's just Kane Wommack talked about setting up one-on-one situations, and if there's an area where they feel like they can exploit maybe an interior offensive lineman, they're going to do it with one of those guys. And it's just all about attacking the offense wherever it can. So I think there's not going to be a lot of static roles on this defense. There's not going to be just some guy that's there to eat up blocks while the other person goes and does something. Like, everybody's going to have a role, and they're all going to have opportunities to really make plays. It's going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah, definitely. I think it'll be. He was very. He was. He brought up the stats of they looked at every NFL interception and how they can generate turnovers by getting pressure on the quarterback. I thought that was really interesting. Two other names I'll throw out there on the linebacker front. He mentioned Jeremiah Alexander, a guy he's moved outside. He got more time at inside linebacker, and then Justin Okoronkwo, who that was also a funny Womack moment where he could.
Very good job saying Okoronkwo too.
Hey, we didn't do broadcast in college for nothing, so we've got that down. That's a guy who was good in the spring game. Seems like he's upping his stock too. And Womack
led Alabama in tackles in the spring game, I think.
Yes, he did 11. So there you go. Segueing off of that too, going in staying in the linebacker room, shifting inside. Kind of one of the biggest, I think, things from what Kane Wommack said after day two. He talked about, obviously, Jod Campbell, Deontay Lawson expected to be the guys at the inside linebacker position. But Kane Wommack really had a lot of praise for Justin Jefferson. Of course, the former JUCO transfer came in 2023. I'll read the quote and get your thoughts, Tony. Just a brief part of what Wommack said, and we have an article up about him and stuff. I think Justin Jefferson, an unbelievable spring. I think he's had an even better summer going into fall camp. And really the thing he said was that he thinks Alabama has 3 starting caliber inside linebackers, which is high praise for a guy in Justin Jefferson. Played a lot on special teams last year coming from the JUCO ranks. What do you think about him?
I mean, that's good to hear. I think from an Alabama perspective, there was a little bit of a concern of like, okay, you've got a JUCO guy that only really played special teams, and you've got an outside linebacker in Jeremiah Alexander, and those are your 2 backups at inside linebackers. Like, what happens if Deontay Lawson or Jahad Campbell gets hurt? It's good to hear that Alabama feels that they have 3 starting level players there. And the one thing I'll say about Jefferson is he brings something that the other 2, don't necessarily have, is that he's got some elite speed. He's a guy that was clocked with an amazing 40 time in coming out of junior college. That's really the reason why he got on Alabama's radar, is just how quick he was in that 40 time. That's a different element, on coverage downs where you need a quicker guy. I think that could be a real game changer. So there might be some packages where he plays, or maybe if you wanted to go, I don't necessarily know how this might work and the logistics of this, but maybe if you wanted to go a little bit more heavy, could he kind of almost fill in to where that Husky position is? And maybe if you wanted to go 3 linebackers there instead of having a defensive back, does he have the speed to kind of do that? And not on a regular basis, but if you're going up against an offense where you're going to need somebody for a few series to be a little bit more physical, maybe even guard more against the run than a typical cornerback would. I think that might be an interesting option, just to kind of play around with, or move into one of those inside spots at inside linebacker, on passing downs. Obviously he'll be a depth piece if nothing else. And if one of those guys goes down, it's good to have a guy. But I think there's several roles where you could get Jefferson into the game, and I think he'll probably also continue to contribute on special teams, and that speed can be really useful on kickoff coverage and punt coverage, and so that'll be interesting as well. But I think there was a little bit of concern about that inside linebacker depth, and I think that's got to be really encouraging for Alabama fans to hear Kane Wommack point that out. Not only that he has depth, but that he has somebody that he feels could be a starter.
Yeah, definitely. And Womack continued on when he was talking about Jefferson, the whole, kind of JUCO jump where he mentioned, it's kind of one of those cases where, hey, maybe we bring him in from JUCO, and the first year he kind of struggles just because you have to get acclimated kind of like a freshman does, even if you're a little bit older. But now all of a sudden he has a year under his belt and he's a senior. It's a veteran. It's not an 18-year-old or 19-year-old you're chucking out there. It's a guy who not only racked up a bunch of tackles and has great speed at the JUCO level, but someone who played in this environment, played in the SEC, albeit on special teams a year ago. So yeah, that experience then becomes really handy. And then, obviously he's worked for it, so he's not going to, give up any sort of playing time opportunities very easily. So yeah, Justin Jefferson, I think definitely will be a name to watch going forward to see how he can impact heading into the season. Finishing things off, Tony, and obviously it's not a quick answer because this was what I think the meat and potatoes of what we wanted to talk about from the first 2 days of spring camp. And Tony wrote a great article. You should subscribe to Tide Illustrated to read it here on Friday about the situation in the DB room and cornerbacks, safeties, all that in particular. That has been a much scrutinized room, hot topic for Alabama. And there was a lot of talk about several guys, young and old, transfers, freshmen, all that stuff in the first 2 days of fall camp. So we're going to make sense of it for you guys. Tony, I'll ask you in general with this cornerback room, with this DB room, anything in particular you saw out of them on the field, and then just what did you make about kind of what the coaching staff said? I know you talked to Coach Maurice Linguist, obviously DeBoer, Womack, all kind of weighed in with the situation in the secondary for Alabama.
For as young as this unit is and as inexperienced as it is, it looks pretty sharp on the field. I think it's yes, you've got a lot of youth, but you've got a lot of high talent youth, a lot of freshmen that could make an instant impact. I think when you look at this cornerback competition, I think Damani Jackson all but has one of those spots locked up. I think the USC transfer, 5-star guy, everything that has been said about the cornerback position from the coaches, and when people start, it all starts with Damani Jackson, and I think he's going to lead this unit on the field. And it's good. You need to have that guy that you're dead sure of. And I think after that, it's a really close battle for that second starting cornerback spot. I think you got Xavier Brown. You got Jalen Mbakwe, who's a guy that, a 5-star kid, but played on both sides of the ball and, did a lot of quarterback, did some receiver. He's a guy that probably would have benefited from just sticking to defense, if he was just, but he did so much on his high school team that he probably needs to kind of polish up his defensive skills. But I think, if you're looking at ceilings, he's got possibly the highest ceiling in that group. You got Xavier Mincy, who I'm not convinced is going to stay at cornerback, but he's, he's kind of big. He's like, what, 6'2", 6'3", or something like that. He's got the speed to play cornerback. I just kind of think that he's going to continue to fill out that frame. And, if you got Xavier Brown and Jalen Mbakwe as your two future cornerbacks, I think probably, Zay Mincy's too hard it's going to be too hard to keep him off the field. Maybe move him back to safety or something like that. But he's another guy too that looks impressive for a freshman. And then you've got Deshaun Jones, who is a transfer with starting experience. He led Wake Forest with 3 interceptions last year. So I mean, you've got some options there. I'm impressed with the unit, and it's going to be a pretty intense battle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I want to ask you about Deshaun Jones first, because obviously I think Damani Jackson, his sort of accolades speak for himself. It hasn't been, the easiest go of it for him at USC, all that. He's had injury struggles, like you said. But Deshaun Jones was a guy, at least in the first 2 days of camp, had kind of a lot of buzz. People were talking about him. What was kind of said about Deshaun Jones? And I guess, you know, you can just elaborate too with what you said. What did you call them? Woke Forest? That I don't know. The
Oh yeah,
Demon Deacons.
woke forest. Yeah, Wake Forest. Yes. I don't know. Maybe they are woke forest. I don't know I don't know what goes on
We
over
don't need
there.
to get into the politics of Wake Forest.
Yeah.
That's not
That was
something I'm
not
prepared
that
to
was
talk
not a
about on
subtle
the
shot at Wake Forest. I really have no idea what the politics are in what
Demon
is it,
Deacon fans
in
who very definitely
Winston-Salem,
listen to this
North Carolina.
podcast are fuming in the comments.
Right.
Anyway, yeah, your thoughts on what has been said about Jones and
Our
you
woke
know
forest
more.
cornerback transfer. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, the storyline or the first, you know, observation with him comes in his experience. You know, there's not a lot of experience in this unit. So when you bring in a guy that started, I think, 10 games last season, on a Power 5 team, he's a redshirt junior, you know, that's gonna help the unit. Just that experience, that veteran mindset's going to help the unit. I don't think it guarantees him playing time. And actually, you know, when we're looking at him during drills, he's kind of working with the second and third grouping. But I do think that that's probably, you know, everybody in this unit has played in this. Everybody in the cornerback unit, at least, has played in the defense during the spring. So he's coming in. He's going to have to learn things. I could see him shooting up. He got a lot of, you know, positive praise from, you know, both Maurice Linguist and Kane Wommack, and I think even, you know, Kalen DeBoer had some nice things to say about him as well. So he's a guy that the thing that stood out in the comments made about him is just that he's a really kind of humble player. He's not one of these guys that's coming in. He's kind of low key, keep his head down and work. I think there was an emphasis to get him ready for the SEC. There's a different type of body type and, you know, a little bit more toughness needed to play in the SEC than there is in the ACC. And I think that he came in and really made those improvements. And, you know, a lot of times you don't see that from a transfer. I think that the development you're able to make early on, that's when you see players make those jumps physically. It says a lot to him that even at that age, you know, where he's kind of feels grounded and feels kind of like he's got things figured out, to be humble enough to kind of embrace the coaching and change and develop into what Alabama needs him to be. I think that that's a good sign early on. I think the fact that he's humble is going to help him because it, you know, you talk about advantages. I think you'd give Xavier Brown the advantage right now just because he worked with the first team defense during the spring. He knows the, you know, Kane Wommack's system better than Deshaun Jones. And despite being a freshman, he's probably got a leg up on, you know, a feel for the defense. Now, will that be the case by the end of preseason? Who knows? But I think, you know, if you get a guy that's totally worried about the depth chart early on, if Deshaun Jones was that guy, I think that could be a conflict because right now you've got a freshman in front of you. But I don't think that's the case. And I think it's going to help him kind of get his feet underneath him. And he's just going to focus on improvement. And I think that that's going to be big for Alabama. And the same thing we said about the inside linebacker position or the, you know, Wolf position, or you're going to need this depth. It's going to be a long season. And, you know, you can knock on wood for Alabama, but there's going to be injuries, you know, like I don't, you know, no one knows where they're going to pop up, but if, you know, if they pop up in the cornerback room, you know, there's not a lot of those guys available. So, you know, really everyone in that unit needs to be ready because
Definitely.
you can get real thin in that unit really fast. And so even if you're the last person in that unit, you might see some significant action. So I think that, you know, with Deshaun Jones, I think it's all about just getting improvement. And I think, you know, he's obviously shown he can play at a Power 5 level. And I think if he continues to work at the rate, especially early on in the season, that veteran presence will be key.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like you said, how he's kind of adjusting and has to make those adjustments from the ACC to the SEC level. I'll just read this chunk of a quote, which also just kind of feels like a funny, like Kane Wommack out of context. You know, he just said on Deshaun Jones, I think he's playing very fast right now. So seems like he's getting acclimated to the speed aspect of things. On the freshman corners, Tony, I'll read a couple quotes on Xavier Brown. Mo Linguist called him a process guy. You mentioned the weight gain. He's added 10 pounds to his frame since coming to Alabama. So maybe you could see that transition even further back, you know, whether he comes into safety or where he kind of ends up in the secondary will be interesting. Jalen Mbakwe is another guy. Wommack said, I would argue that he's made as many strides as anybody in our defense. Pretty big praise. I know Malachi Moore touched on him as well, with how well he's looked. Some of these freshmen, obviously, those just seem like notable quotes, like you mentioned, adding that depth that is probably going to be needed when the inevitable injury strikes. Obviously, knock on wood that it doesn't, but this is football.
Yeah, and those two guys are freshmen. But I think, you look at Xavier Brown, we talked about Ryan Williams not looking like a freshman or not playing like a freshman with that mindset. Xavier Brown's another really mature kid, and he's a few months older. The way, whatever his birthday, the way everything hit, he's one of these kids that's kind of got like a few months on people. You can kind of see that he's a little bit, more mature. I don't know if the difference comes in that being a little bit older or what, but he's a guy that has his head in the right spot. He really impressed during the spring. I mean, he worked with the first team defense right off the bat, and he's somebody that Kalen DeBoer talked about. They talk about his work ethic. They talk about gaining 10 pounds like that. Yes, it's going to help him on the field, but it also shows the dedication to getting things right and getting your body right. It's not easy. It's not like he was some scrawny kid that it's tough to add that. That's 10 pounds of muscle. It's not just, he wasn't just eating burritos, so to come in there in a short period of time and put on that weight, it just shows his work ethic. And I think at this moment, if there was, it's pretty close probably between him and Deshaun Jones. I think Deshaun Jones is his veteran experience. I think that's going to be key. But I think at the moment, I'd probably go Xavier Brown as my, if I was redoing a depth chart right now, I would go with him. I think it's going to be close. But he's such a talented kid. And the fact that he's not really playing or acting like a freshman, I think you kind of throw those freshman stereotypes out the window. So I think that's something to look at. And then in Mbakwe, it kind of goes back to what we were saying. He's kind of raw. So of course he's going to make the steps needed, the most significant steps in the unit, just because I think he had kind of a lot of room to grow and his ceiling is so high. So I think you're going to continue to see him make strides. For him, I put him as a contender for the starting spot. He's kind of a dark horse contender for that. I think he might be a guy like halfway through the season or, late in the season might bump his way onto the field just because he's so talented. That might be the case with him. I think he's still got a little bit of ways to go before he's ready. But that talent level is so high. I think, like I said, Xavier Brown's a 5-star kid in his own right, a really talented guy. I think Mbakwe, natural athletic ability, has even more than that. And he could be really special once he gets everything, kind of locked in.
Yeah. I mean, Xavier Brown, when you said that, I just thought back to what Tyler Booker said at SEC Media Days about freshmen, where he's like, the locker room can tell which guys are going to play right away. And it seems like Xavier Brown is kind of giving off that, those traits, at least on the depth chart, and when that'll be final. What did you talked to Mo Linguist for a little bit after the second practice? What did he say in regards to the timeline for when they're kind of going to have things figured out? I know there's some interesting stuff with positional alignment and stuff like that. What did he tell you?
One of the things I asked Mo Linguist was just, when is that deadline or when's that goal to kind of like divvy out roles? Because in this Alabama defense and Kane Wommack setup, you have a field cornerback and a boundary cornerback, and you're going to want to get. I don't think it's going to be necessarily, somebody's locked into field cornerback and can never play boundary, but I think you're going to want, if you're going to play someone primarily at the field or primarily at the boundary position, you're going to want to eventually divvy out those roles and kind of like have them focus on that area of their game. So I think down the road, when you get closer to, game week for Western Kentucky at the end of the month, I think you're maybe going to start see a little bit of a division. But for right now, I think it's more just getting everyone reps. And I think that because this unit is so young, you might even extend that period even longer to make sure that people are comfortable on both sides and just to make sure that people are getting the most amount of reps possible. Another thing to consider too is, and this is something Mo Linguist brought up as well, I keep on sounding like a broken record, but it is an extended season, and this is a particularly thin unit. So you really don't have the luxury of having guys that don't know how to play both. You know, like you might be so thin that you're going to need people that be able to handle both roles. So
Yeah.
I think they're needing to get people ready as soon as possible and ready for as much as possible. So right now, I don't think you're going to see anything definitive on the depth chart for a while. I think, you know, maybe 2 weeks out, if I'm estimating, I think that's when you might start seeing some shift. You know what I'm saying? Like once Alabama starts slowly transitioning to prepare for Western Kentucky, I think you're going to start seeing those roles kind of change. You're going to have, you know, maybe Damani Jackson becomes a field cornerback and he's going to focus on, you know, that. And you're going to have Xavier Brown as maybe a boundary cornerback. Now, those roles haven't been determined yet, but, you know, you're going to start seeing that a little bit more, probably, you know, in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. It's all about those reps, Tony. It's all about those reps. That feels like it's going to extend.
Process, one day at a time, right, Jack?
Yeah.
Just regular
it's just like with us journalists. That's how we cover each of these things. It's one day at a time.
Event at a time. Sure.
One event at a time, one practice. That's what we get through. And I'll end with this. What is one thing you are going to be looking for in the next couple of days of fall camp, whether it's something with the position groups we touched on or somewhere else in the field? I personally would like to just spend an entire practice watching possibly the best kicking duo in the country in James Burnip and Graham Nicholson.
Kick on air, just kick.
Both were nominated for their respective Lou Groza and
maybe we'll just send you out there with the camera to the far field and you just watch, you know, James Burnham just punt balls up in the air. That'll get a ton of views.
I think that's the content we want. But what are you looking for?
I think that offensive line position is so, you know, so important. You know, I think we just spent all this time talking about the cornerback position. That's obviously important as well. I think the expectation is for Kadyn Proctor to move into that left tackle role. I'm waiting for that to happen, and then I want to see the, you know, domino effect from that. Because so far we've seen Elijah Pritchett at left tackle and Will Conform at right tackle. I've heard that Elijah Pritchett's kind of going to be like the swing guy, so he's going to play left tackle as well. But I think you're going to see him take a lot more reps at right tackle, whereas in the spring without Kadyn Proctor, he was focusing. Pritchett was focusing primarily at that left tackle spot. I think you're going to see him take reps at both spots. And in order to be that kind of backup left tackle / starting right tackle, possibly, he's going to battle with Will Conform and Miles McVay for that job. That'll just be interesting to watch. And the other thing too is, you know, Parker Brailsford seems to be the starting center. I don't think there's any, you know, real question about that. But, you know, we've seen Rock Montgomery take snaps as the backup center. We've seen Gino Vandemark take snaps as the backup center. It'd just be nice to kind of like keep an eye on what Alabama is doing that and at that spot. And if Parker Brailsford does go down, really, who's that number 2 center? That'll be interesting as well.
Yeah, I agree. I'll throw a real answer out. You know, as much as I do love kickers, and I want to make that known because someone's got to stand up for them because I feel like they get too much hate. I'm curious to see where, you know, what we get more from the offensive coaches hearing about this, the running back room with Justice Haynes, Jam Miller, Richard Young as well. Even some of these freshmen. I think Daniel Hill's a giant. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. He's a really interesting prospect to me because he's so much bigger than all of those guys. Where does he fit in? Do they have any packages planned for him this year? So that's probably what I'll say is the running back room. How is that kind of progressing here as fall camp continues? And hopefully we get more, I don't know, outfit discussions maybe. If Kalen DeBoer was asked if he's going to have anything definitive like Saban with his hat, and of course, you have Wommack. He said he wasn't, so we'll have to see if anything, you know, maybe emerges if we notice anything. But he seems just like a shorts and t-shirt guy.
Kalen DeBoer.
That's a good note to end it on. I hope everyone enjoyed. We'll keep doing these recaps as fall camp continues, kind of sprinkle them out. But go over to Tide Illustrated, subscribe there, follow mine and Tony's stuff. Like we said, we post nuggets for every single practice we're able to be at, media stuff as well. So go check that out. And until next time, we'll see you soon.